It wasn't treason that sealed a queen's fate, but a king's obsession and a well-told lie. This is the story of how Anne Boleyn, one of history's most powerful women, fell from the throne to the executioner's block in a matter of weeks. In the pre-dawn gloom of the Tower of London on May 19, 1536, the grating sound of a blade being honed slices through the morning mist. This is no ordinary day. The methodical, deliberate scrape of steel on wet stone is a chilling prelude to a royal execution. You, until recently the Queen of England, have less than 4 hours before that very blade takes your life. Within the stone confines of your cell, your heart pounds against your ribs as you perch on a simple bed. A tremor runs through your hands, born not of the morning chill, but of a terrifying certainty. Outside, the sharp reports of carpenters' mallets echo in your bones, each blow a countdown to your demise as they assemble the scaffold for your final public appearance. Your ladies-in-waiting drift silently around the chamber, their faces pale and strained. They dress you in a somber gray damask gown over a white chemise, the colors of piety and mourning. You can't help but ponder the bitter irony of Henry's color selection. Even in your death, he manipulates the story, casting you as a repentant sinner instead of the wife he wronged. The very air in the tower is thick with the stench of river muck and despair, but today it is laced with the metallic tang of fear and the faint, sweet aroma of incense from the chapel, where prayers are being offered for your soul. Beyond your door, you hear the low murmur of voices, the scuff of feet, and the clinking of armor as the guards assume their positions. The grim apparatus of state-sanctioned death is already in motion, with you as its centerpiece. Before we delve into these harrowing tales of survival and suffering, take a moment to consider our shared human curiosity that connects us across time and space as we explore these ancient stories from different corners of the globe. If you appreciate uncovering the hidden truths of the past, show your support by liking and subscribing for more explorations like this. I'm always fascinated to hear where you're joining from, so please leave a comment below. The catastrophe that culminated in Anne's execution did not originate from treason or adultery. Instead, it was sparked by Henry VIII's all-consuming desperation for a male heir and his deepening infatuation with Jane Seymour. By January 1536, Anne had suffered another miscarriage, a devastating blow that coincided with a severe jousting accident that left Henry unconscious for 2 hours. The symbolism was stark and lost on no one at court. As the king's life hung in the balance, so did Anne's hope of securing her reign through motherhood. The lost child was rumored to be male, a detail that would plague Anne's last days. Henry, who had fractured the nation and defied Rome to marry her, started to claim their union was cursed by God, ironically using the same theological arguments he had employed to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon. The very logic that had elevated Anne would now be used to orchestrate her downfall. However, Henry needed more than a claim of divine displeasure to dispose of Anne. He required legal justification that wouldn't cast doubt on his own judgment or the legitimacy of their daughter, Elizabeth. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister, a man whose political survival depended on anticipating the king's every whim, began to fabricate a case so damning it would not only destroy Anne, but also eradicate any public sympathy for her. Cromwell's first move was to target the court musician Mark Smeaton. Young, charming, and popular with the court ladies, Smeaton was everything Henry was not. On April 30th, 1536, Cromwell had Smeaton arrested and interrogated, almost certainly using torture. Though official records are silent on the methods, Smeaton, who initially denied any wrongdoing, emerged from Cromwell's custody ready to confess to adultery with the Queen, providing the very foundation of the case against her. His confession, given its timing and detail, strongly suggests a man broken by agony. willing to say anything to make the torment cease. With Smeaton's confession secured, Cromwell swiftly wove a web of alleged conspirators. Henry Norris, a close friend of the king, was arrested on May 1st during the May Day festivities. William Brereton, a gentleman of the Privy Chamber, was taken to the Tower on May 4th, accused not only of adultery, but of conspiring to murder the king. The most shocking arrests followed. Sir Francis Weston, a young, wealthy, and recently married nobleman, was arrested on May 5th. Finally, on May 2nd, the most devastating charge was laid. Anne's own brother, George Boleyn, was accused of incest with his sister. This monstrous accusation was designed to paint Anne as a creature of such depravity that no punishment could be considered too harsh, effectively silencing anyone who might dare to defend her. The speed of the arrests, all occurring within 5 days, highlights the meticulously planned nature of the plot. Anne herself was arrested on May 2nd, just after watching Henry play tennis with Francis Weston, the very man who would soon be accused as her lover. The charges were read to her by her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, demonstrating the brutal reality of Tudor politics, where family loyalty was worthless against the weight of royal favor. Anne initially laughed at the absurdity of the accusations, but her laughter faded as the full, horrifying scope of the plot against her became clear. Her journey to the Tower of London was a cruel reversal of her triumphal coronation procession just 3 years earlier. The same crowds that had once cheered her now watched in silence. She was housed in the very apartments she had occupied before her coronation, a constant painful reminder of how far she had fallen. Sir William Kingston, the Constable of the Tower, was tasked with recording her every word, his reports painting a picture of a woman oscillating between defiant assertions of innocence and overwhelming despair. The trials were a masterclass in legal theatrics, designed to provide a veneer of legitimacy to political executions. The evidence was flimsy and circumstantial, built on gossip and Smeaton's coerced confession. Despite this, Norris, Brereton, and Weston maintained their innocence to the end. George Boleyn delivered such a compelling defense that the jury seemed swayed, but he made a fatal error by reading aloud a damning question about the king's virility, sealing his own fate. The verdicts were all foregone conclusions. On May 17, 1536, the 5 men were beheaded on Tower Hill. Smeaton upheld his confession, while the others proclaimed their innocence. From her prison, Anne would have heard the sounds of their executions, a form of psychological torture that must have been unbearable. Anne's own trial on May 15th was a spectacle presided over by her uncle. The charges, including specific dates and locations of her alleged affairs and a plot to kill the king, were read out. She maintained her composure and denied everything, but without legal counsel or the right to call witnesses, her defense was futile. The jury of peers, their own futures dependent on the king's favor, delivered the inevitable guilty verdict. She was sentenced to death by burning or beheading, at the king's pleasure. The question of Anne's guilt has been debated for centuries. The evidence was weak, the timing of the accusations convenient for Henry, who was already pursuing Jane Seymour, and the confessions were either non-existent or extracted under duress. While Anne was known for her sharp tongue and political ambition, which created enemies, the charges against her were almost certainly fabricated to serve the king's desires. As Anne awaited her fate, Henry moved quickly. He had his marriage to Anne annulled on the grounds of a prior relationship with her sister Mary, a staggering contradiction, as he was simultaneously executing her for adultery within a marriage he now claimed never legally existed. This act rendered their daughter Elizabeth illegitimate and erased Anne's identity as queen. Henry arranged for a skilled swordsman to be brought from France for the execution. A supposed act of mercy as a sword was considered quicker than the traditional English axe. On the morning of May 19th, Anne dressed in a dark gown and white chemise, her hair arranged for the executioner's convenience. She walked to the scaffold on the Tower Green before a crowd of spectators with remarkable dignity. Her final speech was carefully worded. She praised the king and accepted her fate without directly admitting guilt or proclaiming innocence, likely to protect her daughter, Elizabeth. After her ladies blindfolded her, she knelt. The French executioner, in a single swift movement, ended her life. Her remains were unceremoniously placed in an arrow chest and buried in the Tower's chapel. Henry married Jane Seymour just 11 days later, attempting to expunge Anne from history. However, he failed. Anne's story survived, and her legacy was ultimately secured through her daughter, Elizabeth I, who would become one of England's most celebrated monarchs. The execution marked a dark turning point in Henry's reign, revealing him as a ruthless tyrant. The silence that fell over the Tower after the blade fell marked the end of a tragic chapter, but the ghost of Anne Boleyn would continue to haunt English history, a powerful symbol of ambition, betrayal, and the brutal nature of absolute power.